At the 2021 NBA trade deadline, the Miami Heat made a move that many people thought would make them contenders in the East again when they snagged Victor Oladipo from the Rockets in exchange for Kelly Olynyk and some minor pieces. But shortly after this trade went down, Victor Oladipo suffered yet another injury in his quadricep tendon, which was heartbreaking news for Heat fans to say the least. And now, it's looking like the Miami Heat were losers in this trade, and it could have a substantial impact on their future. Today, we will be discussing the latest news on Victor Oladipo, how this affects the Heat, and the fact that his career might just be over. But as always, if you enjoy this video or are new, it would be absolutely clutch if you subscribed and joined the Woods crew. As it turns out, over 95% of you guys who consistently watch the videos aren't even subscribed. So if you just hit that sub button below and dropped a like on this video, I could go full time very soon and make videos like this every single day for you guys. With all that being said though, let's just get right into Victor Oladipo news and why the Heat were the true losers of this big move at the deadline. It's no secret that coming into this season, the Miami Heat had some high hopes, being that they just pulled off what many thought was impossible and made it to the NBA Finals last year with their young core. Honestly, after this historic run, it was looking like the Heat had the brightest future in the league, and although things didn't exactly pan out how this team wanted, they still secured the 5th seed in the East at the time of making this video, which is very good all things considered. But going into the season, the Miami Heat literally made no moves to improve their roster, which surprised many analysts, especially with all the other contenders improving their roster tremendously. Now I know at the time the Heat were hoping that they could pry away Giannis from the Bucks because he hadn't resigned yet, but this team didn't even attempt to make some minor moves and let one of their most underrated pieces in Jay Crowder walk for nothing and join the Suns. It was clear that the Miami Heat had major faith in the development of Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and Bam Adebayo, and believed that it was all they needed to become championship contenders once again, but boy were they wrong. No hate on the young Heat guys because they are all great, but you can't just expect these guys, especially Tyler Hero, to take a leap that big in just a year. Not to mention that it's only his 2nd year in the league. They need time to develop, and there's just no way that they can progress that fast. So in my eyes, that one's on the Heat. But I cannot knock the Heat front office that hard, because they definitely realized that they in fact didn't have what it takes to make it all the way to the championship again, being that they made a move at the deadline for Victor Oladipo, which many thought gave the Heat a chance against the best teams of the East in the Nets and 76ers. Now at the time, I praised the Heat for this move and even said that they finessed the Rockets, and I'll link that video above if you guys want to check it out because it is pretty funny how things changed so quickly. Because all this team gave up was Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, in a pick swap, which did seem like a bargain for Oladipo, which even though was on an expiring deal, still gave this team a potential star for this year's playoffs run. But now looking back, it seems as though this deal was a mistake for the Heat, but it did provide some valuable information that we will discuss in a bit. What I mean by that though is the fact that the Miami Heat did give up a great piece looking back, because since the Heat dealt off Kelly Olynyk to the Rockets, he has been playing the best basketball of his career and is looking like he could get a solid contract this offseason, and the stats don't lie. Before the trade, while with the Heat, Kelly Olynyk averaged 10 points and 6.1 rebounds while playing solid minutes. During this time, he was also shooting 43, 32, 78 splits, which weren't the best, but were solid for the role that he was playing and the fact that he had been shooting a lot more threes than he used to. But since joining the Rockets, Olynyk has been balling at a very high level, averaging 19.1 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 3.9 assists, along with almost 2 steals a game, which in itself is absurd. And that's not where it ends, because Olynyk's splits have also improved to 56, 40, and 85. Yes, a 7-foot stretch center is shooting 40% from 3 on high volume out of nowhere. Looks like the Rockets lucked out to say the least. Don't get me wrong here, I'm not hating on the Heat for making this move at all, because in my eyes, it was very necessary for them to do. This team needed improvement that could get them somewhere in the playoffs this year, and Oladipo, well, he was just a gamble that this team had to take even if he'd been injured so many times in his career. But what is clear at this point is that the Miami Heat did in fact lose this trade. Honestly, I feel terrible for Oladipo. My man was one of the most promising guards in the league at one point and just hasn't been able to play the games that he wanted to because of injuries. In my eyes, this might be the end of Oladipo's career, or at least the potential to bounce back to what he once was, but that's for a whole nother video in itself. What we do have to discuss though is the fact that the Heat were officially losers in this trade, even though it was one they had to make. With Oladipo as good as gone and Kelly Olynyk playing next level basketball, it is clear that the Heat would have just been better off if they held onto him and used him in the playoffs, even though if he didn't improve like he did with the Rockets. But even though the Oladipo trade was somewhat of a bust for the Miami Heat, it did give them a valuable lesson and a preview into the offseason for a very small cost in Kelly Olynyk. What I mean by that is the Miami Heat were expected to sign Oladipo this offseason if they didn't trade for him, because more than anything, he wanted to play on the Miami Heat with Jimmy Butler and their young core. At the time that it was revealed the Heat would more than likely sign Depot if they didn't trade for him, I was honestly a little skeptical. I mean, don't get me wrong here, I love Oladipo's game, but the fact is he's been so injury prone the past few years, it's hard to sign him to a big deal in my eyes, because it's just too much of a risk locking up all that money. But luckily, this trade allowed the Heat to experiment and even take a step back to look at their team as a whole to determine what they should do this offseason, because if you didn't know, it will be a very big one for the Heat. What I mean by that is the fact that the Miami Heat only have 6 players on the books for next year, which means that the rest of the team will either be free agents or have team options if the team decides to decline the rest of their deal. With that being said, there will be quite a few notable names for the Heat that will be hitting the market, including Kendrick Nunn and Duncan Robinson. But because of the Oladipo experiment, it is clear that the Heat would be much better off bringing one or both of those guys back instead of signing Oladipo to a deal, because my man won't even be back until the 2023 season, which is a long ways away for this Heat team that is looking to contend right now. But even if they don't sign Oladipo, don't expect the Heat to bring both of those guys back, because there's a very good chance that they try and chase someone big in free agency that can help them win now. And let me know down below if you want the best options for the Heat this offseason, because that is a whole other video in itself. But with all that being said, now that the playoff games are locked in, it's looking like the Heat have a solid chance of moving on past the first round despite losing Victor Oladipo. That being because this team will match up and play against Giannis and the Bucks in the first round, which although will be a very tough matchup, is also one that the Heat team could very well win. What makes this matchup very interesting is that the Heat handled the Bucks very well last year, but the Bucks have made some notable moves since then, and the Heat just haven't done that except for the injured Oladipo. With that being said though, we just have to take a deep dive into this matchup, because even though it will be very different with Oladipo, the Heat will still match up very well with this team, which is why I believe this series could go either way. Starting with the starting lineup, despite the moves that the Bucks made, in my eyes, the Heat still have a solid advantage. With Bam having the edge at center, Butler being the better power forward, and the rest of the matchups at the guards being even, I feel like the Heat have a very good chance of overpowering this Bucks team if they remain healthy. Now I know that at the power forward the Bucks have this team beat with the Greek Freak, but the fact is, in my eyes, unless Giannis breaks out of his ceiling that's been put on him in the playoffs, the Heat should be able to shut him down or at least slow him down enough to take games that matter most. We already knew that this Heat team could beat the Bucks though. I mean, we literally saw it last year. The question is, will the Drew Holiday acquisition have a large enough impact to put the Bucks on top? Well, the answer to this is tough, because we just don't know how Drew Holiday will play against this Heat team and what defense the Heat will run for the Bucks. But as of right now, many are saying that the matchup for the most part against Holiday will be Kendrick Nunn. I'm going to be honest here. This matchup concerns me a little bit because of the fact that Drew Holiday is a sneaky good offensive player, even if people don't give him the recognition he deserves. But despite only being in his second year, I have faith in Kendrick Nunn. And the fact is, Drew Holiday won't even be the biggest impact on the offensive side of the ball anyways. What it comes down to is whether or not he can lock up the Heat's best talent on defense and prevent them from outscoring the Bucks. Despite Holiday being one of the better defenders in the league, in my eyes, the Heat team should be able to get them enough points on the board to get them wins. People forget that this Heat team does have a lot of depth despite losing guys like Jay Crowder and Kelly Olynyk. I mean, this team literally has Goran Dragic and Tyler Hero coming off the bench, which could very well be a starting backcourt in the league easily. So even if Drew Holiday locks up the starting lineup, there's a very good chance that the bench unit picks up the slack while he's getting a breather, because they are that good. To say the least, this first round matchup for the Heat will be very interesting, and if they were able to lose, it's safe to say that the front office will take a step back and look at this team and decide as a whole whether or not they should make a big move. Regardless though, this playoff series is going to be good, so let me know down below if you'd like me to start uploading daily videos analyzing the Heat's games, because I know that most of you guys subscribed are Miami Heat fans at heart. But if not, I'll be sure to post general videos throughout the playoff series just like this one. But with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one. Woods out.